Imagine you're standing in a tunnel beneath the Colosseum. It's dark. The air is thick with animal dung, sweat, and something metallic you can't quite name yet. Above you, 50,000 Romans are stomping their feet in unison. The stone vibrates under your sandals. Dust falls from the ceiling. You can hear them chanting, but the words blur into a single, deep, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat that belongs to something enormous and hungry. You're not a gladiator. You're not a soldier. You're a baker from Trastevere who made the mistake, the fatal, irreversible mistake, of whispering a prayer to the wrong god. You are a Christian, and in about 90 seconds, you're going to be entertainment. Not executed, not punished. Entertained with. There's a difference. And that difference is the subject of this video. Because Rome didn't just kill Christians. Any empire can kill people. Rome did something far more sophisticated, far more terrifying, and far more profitable. They turned the act of killing into a product. They built an entire economic ecosystem. Architects, animal importers, costume designers, scriptwriters, caterers, betting agencies, all revolving around one central commodity, watching people die in creative ways. And the Christians? They were the premium content. This is the story no one tells properly. Not the martyrdom, not the theology, the business model. How Rome looked at religious persecution and saw not a problem to solve, but a market to exploit. How they industrialized cruelty, how they franchised it across the empire, and how the economics of death created the most sophisticated entertainment infrastructure the ancient world had ever seen. Act 1. The architecture of appetite. To understand how Rome turned executions into entertainment, you have to understand something about Roman psychology that most history classes skip entirely. Romans were not savages. That's the easy story. That's the story that lets us feel superior. The truth is worse. Romans were connoisseurs. By the 1st century AD, Rome had a problem. The Republic was dead. The old civic virtues, voting, debating, military service, the things that used to give Roman life meaning, had been replaced by autocracy. The emperor made the decisions now. The Senate was decorative. The legions were professionalized. The average Roman citizen had been stripped of every meaningful form of participation in public life. So what do you do with a population of over 1 million people who have nothing to do? You entertain them. But here's the thing about entertainment. It escalates. Always. Think about it in modern terms. The first time you watch a horror movie, it's terrifying. The 10th time, you need more blood. The 100th time, you need something you've never seen before. Roman entertainment followed the exact same escalation curve, except it was real. By the time Christians enter this story, Rome had already been running public games for over 3 centuries. They'd started simple: chariot races, boxing matches, the occasional animal hunt. But 3 centuries of weekly programming had created an audience with an appetite. And that appetite needed feeding. Constantly. Let me give you a sense of scale. During the inauguration of the Colosseum in 80 AD, the Emperor Titus held games that lasted 100 days. Not a typo. 100 consecutive days of spectacle. During those 100 days, approximately 9,000 animals were killed. Thousands of gladiators fought. Naval battles were staged by flooding the arena floor, and scattered throughout, executions. Hundreds of them. Staged, scripted, choreographed executions designed not just to punish, but to delight. Think about what that requires. Not morally, logistically. 100 days of unique content. No repeats, no reruns, no audience leaving early because they've seen this one before. That's a production challenge that would overwhelm most modern entertainment companies. And Rome solved it with a system so efficient, so brutal, so perfectly designed that it ran for centuries without interruption. The Colosseum itself tells this story. Most people think it's just a big arena. It's not. It's a machine. Beneath the arena floor, the hypogeum, is a subterranean network of tunnels, chambers, elevators, and trapdoors that would make a modern theater director weep with envy. 36 trapdoors in the floor, each one capable of raising scenery, animals, or condemned prisoners into the arena in seconds. The system used counterweights and pulleys operated by hundreds of slaves working in shifts. An animal could appear from nowhere. A prisoner could drop through the floor and vanish. Entire forests could be assembled on the arena floor overnight. Real trees, real bushes, real earth, to create the setting for a hunt or an execution tableau. This wasn't punishment. This was production design. Act 2. The Menu of Death. Now, here's where it gets specifically dark. Because Rome didn't just throw Christians to the lions and call it a day. That's the popular image, the Sunday school version. The real history is far more creative, and the creativity is the point. Roman executions of condemned criminals, a category that, by the mid-1st century, increasingly meant Christians, fell into a specific programming slot in the day's entertainment. The games had a schedule. Morning, animal hunts, the venationes. Midday, executions, the meridiani. Afternoon, gladiatorial combat, the main event. For a long time, the midday slot was considered the boring part, the warm-up act, the filler between the real attractions. Seneca, writing in the 1st century, describes walking into the arena at midday and being disgusted, not by the cruelty, but by the artlessness. Simple throat cuttings, no skill, no drama. He found it tedious. Read that again. A Roman philosopher found watching people die tedious because it lacked artistic merit. That complaint? That's the market signal. Because Roman entertainment producers, and yes, there were professional producers, the editores, heard that feedback. The midday slot was losing audience. People were leaving for lunch. The seats were emptying between the morning hunts and the afternoon gladiators. They had a ratings problem. And the solution they invented changed everything. They started theming the executions. Here's how it worked. Instead of simply killing the condemned, producers began staging elaborate mythological reenactments, fatal charades, as historians call them, where the condemned prisoner was forced to play the role of a mythological character who dies horribly. And the death would be real. Picture this. The arena floor has been transformed overnight. There are real trees, real rocks, a small hill in the center with a wooden structure on top. The audience recognizes the scene immediately. It's Mount Caucasus. They know what's coming. A man is brought out, a Christian, condemned for refusing to sacrifice to the emperor's genius. He's chained to the wooden structure. He's been dressed, or undressed, to look like Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods. And then they release the eagle. Except it's not an eagle, it's a trained bear, or a pack of wild dogs. And the Prometheus is torn apart on the artificial mountain while the audience watches a myth come to life. Real blood, real screams, but framed, always framed, as art. Now multiply that by every myth in the Roman canon. A woman condemned as a Christian is forced to play Dirce, the queen from the Theban cycle who was tied to a wild bull and dragged to death. Real bull, real ropes, real death. The audience applauds the staging. A man plays Orpheus, charming animals with a lyre in a pastoral set, until a trapdoor opens and a bear mauls him. The twist is the point. The audience knew Orpheus was torn apart by Maenads. The bear is the Roman update. They're not just watching someone die, they're watching a reinterpretation. Another condemned Christian plays Icarus. He's fitted with crude wax and feather wings and launched from a height. He falls, obviously. He shatters on the arena floor. The poet Martial was there for this one. He wrote it up like a theater review. Icarus, when you fell, how you spattered the nearby bear. He rated the splatter pattern. Let that sink in. They had critics. The executions had critics. Men who reviewed the deaths of human beings with the same vocabulary they used for plays and poetry recitals. Technical merit, emotional impact, originality. This is what industrialized cruelty looks like. It doesn't wear a monster's face, it wears a connoisseur's. Act 3. The supply chain of suffering. Now here's the question no one asks. Where did all the animals come from? Where did the sets come from? Who paid for it? Who profited? Because behind every arena death was a supply chain that stretched across 3 continents. And understanding that supply chain reveals something astonishing about the Roman economy. Start with the animals. To keep the Colosseum stocked for a single season of games, Rome needed a constant supply of exotic and dangerous creatures. Lions from North Africa, bears from the forests of Germania, leopards from Persia, crocodiles from Egypt, elephants from Numidia, hippos from the Upper Nile, rhinoceroses imported at staggering expense from sub-Saharan Africa. This created an entire industry. Professional animal hunters, venatores, operated across the empire. They had networks of trappers, local guides, holding facilities, and specialized transport ships. Getting a live lion from the Atlas Mountains to Rome was a logistical operation comparable to a modern military deployment. The animal had to be captured alive, transported overland in a reinforced cage to the nearest port, loaded onto a specially modified ship, because a panicking lion in the hold of a standard grain ship tends to end the voyage prematurely. Sailed across the Mediterranean, offloaded at Ostia, carted 15 miles inland to Rome, kept alive and fed in underground holding pens beneath the arena until showtime. The cost was astronomical, and it was worth it, because the rarer the animal, the bigger the draw. The bigger the draw, the more political capital for the editor sponsoring the games. It was an investment. A senator who staged memorable games could leverage that popularity into votes, alliances, and power. An emperor who put on the best games reinforced his legitimacy with the mob. But the animals were just one line item. There were the set designers, skilled craftsmen who built the mythological stages, carpenters, painters, sculptors, engineers who designed the trapdoor systems. There were the costume makers who dressed the condemned, sometimes in elaborate outfits soaked in animal blood to attract the beasts. There were the musicians, full orchestras who provided live soundtracks to the killings. Different compositions for different deaths. Mournful flutes for the mythological tableaus, drums for the animal hunts, triumphant horns when the killing blow landed. There were the food vendors. 50,000 people sitting in the sun all day need to eat. The Colosseum had a thriving concession economy. Sausage sellers, wine merchants, fruit vendors, pastry hawkers, all working the crowd while people died in the sand below. Archaeologists have found the remains of food stalls built into the Colosseum's outer arcades. They've found menus. You could buy roasted nuts, honeyed dates, and spiced wine while watching a Christian get torn apart by a leopard. There were the betting operations. Romans bet on everything. Which gladiator would win? How long a condemned prisoner would survive? Which animal would make the kill? Informal bookmaking operations ran throughout the stands. Money changed hands constantly. The executions weren't just spectacle, they were a gambling platform. And then there were the souvenirs. Oil lamps stamped with images of arena scenes, small clay figurines of famous gladiators, engraved cups depicting animal hunts. We have these. They're in museums. They're the ancient equivalent of concert merchandise, mass-produced memorabilia from the greatest show in the ancient world. Do you see what this is? This isn't persecution. I mean, it is, but that word is too small. This is a vertically integrated entertainment conglomerate built on human death. It has production, distribution, concessions, merchandising, and gambling. It has professional critics and audience development strategies. It has a talent pipeline, the condemned, and a content calendar that runs year-round. Modern sports leagues would recognize the business model instantly. Act 4. Why Christians were premium content. Now, Rome executed lots of people, criminals, prisoners of war, runaway slaves. So why did Christians become the marquee attraction? Why were they the ones who packed the stands? The answer is disturbing, and it has nothing to do with theology. Christians were better content because Christians behaved differently. When a common criminal was thrown to the beasts, they did what you'd expect. They screamed, they ran, they clawed at the walls, they begged. It was visceral, yes, but it was predictable. After a few dozen, the audience had seen every variation of panic. There's only so many ways a terrified person can run from a lion. But Christians? The sources, pagan, Christian, and neutral, all agree on this point. Many Christians didn't run. They didn't scream. They sang. They prayed. Some walked toward the animals. Some knelt in the sand and closed their eyes. And that was riveting, because the audience had never seen anything like it. The whole architecture of the spectacle was designed around the assumption that the condemned would be terrified. The mythological costumes, the elaborate sets, the dramatic music, it was all built to frame fear. But when the central performer refuses to be afraid, the entire narrative shifts. It becomes something uncanny, something the audience can't categorize, something they can't look away from. The Roman governor Pliny the Younger, writing to the Emperor Trajan around 112 AD, describes his confusion about Christians with clinical precision. He calls their behavior obstinatio, stubbornness. But there's something else in his language, something like fascination. These people chose death over a simple gesture, a pinch of incense on an altar. That's all they had to do. Burn a little incense, say the emperor is divine, go home. And they wouldn't do it. From the producer's perspective, this was gold, because unpredictable content is the most valuable content. A gladiator fight has a known structure: attack, defend, wound, kill. An animal hunt follows established patterns. But a Christian in the arena? You didn't know what would happen. Would they break and run? Would they stand firm? Would they try to convert the audience? Some reportedly did. There are accounts of condemned Christians shouting sermons at the crowd while animals circled them. The audience was mesmerized. Not converted, mesmerized. The way you'd be mesmerized by a car crash. The wrongness of the behavior was the attraction. These people were violating every survival instinct the audience understood and doing it with composure. In a culture that worshipped virtus, courage in the face of death, the Christians were, accidentally, putting on the most compelling display of it the arena had ever seen. And the Roman producers knew exactly what to do with compelling content. They leaned in. Act 5. Nero's innovation. Death as theater. No discussion of this industry is complete without the man who industrialized it. Not the man who invented arena executions. Those existed before him. The man who turned them into prime-time spectacle. Nero, 64 AD. Rome is burning. The Great Fire has consumed 10 of the city's 14 districts. Hundreds of thousands are homeless. The city is traumatized, furious, and looking for someone to blame. And the rumors are pointing at Nero himself. He needs a scapegoat. He needs it fast. And he needs the scapegoating to be so spectacular, so overwhelming, so total, that it drowns out the whispers about who really started the fire. He chooses the Christians. Now, the Christian community in Rome at this point is small, maybe a few thousand. They're mostly poor, mostly foreign-born, mostly invisible. They meet in private homes. They practice strange rituals that Romans don't understand, eating the body of their god, drinking his blood. The rumors already circulate that they're cannibals, atheists, incestuous. They're the perfect target. Marginal enough that no powerful patron will defend them. Strange enough that the accusations will stick. But Nero doesn't just arrest and execute them. That's old thinking. He stages the executions in his private gardens, opens them to the public, free of charge. And what he creates there is something Rome has never seen before. Some Christians are sewn into animal skins and thrown to dogs. Standard. But then Nero adds something new. He has Christians coated in pitch and wax, tied to tall posts throughout his gardens, and set on fire. to serve as human torches to illuminate an evening party. Read that again. Human beings, alive, burning, used as lighting fixtures while Rome's elite stroll through the gardens, sip wine, nibble figs, and admire the landscaping. Nero himself, according to Tacitus, drives a chariot among the burning bodies, dressed as a charioteer, basking in the glow. This is the moment. This is when execution crosses the final line from punishment to aesthetic experience. Nero hasn't just killed these people, he's made them into ambiance. They're not the show, they're the set decoration for the show. Their deaths serve the mood of a garden party. And the most horrifying thing? It worked. Tacitus, who hates Nero, who thinks he's a monster, admits that some Romans actually began to feel pity for the Christians, not because the punishment was cruel, but because it was so clearly serving one man's ego rather than justice. The cruelty was so baroque, so theatrical, so obviously performative that even the Roman public, a public accustomed to watching death as leisure, felt something was off. But they didn't stop attending. That's the part that matters. They felt uncomfortable, and they kept watching. Because the spectacle was too good to miss. Nero had proven something that every entertainment mogul since has understood intuitively. Discomfort and fascination are not opposites. They're collaborators. Act 6, the franchise model. Here's what most people don't realize. The Colosseum gets all the attention, but the Colosseum was just the flagship store. By the 2nd century AD, there were over 230 amphitheaters across the Roman Empire. 230. From Londinium in Britain to Thysdrus in North Africa. From Tarraco in Spain to Caesarea in Palestine. Each one running its own games, each one with its own production teams, animal suppliers, condemned prisoners, and audience demographics. This was a franchise. And like any franchise, there was standardization. The format of the games, morning hunts, midday executions, afternoon gladiators, was replicated everywhere. A Roman citizen in Gaul would experience the same basic structure as a citizen in Rome. The brand was consistent. But there was also local variation. Provincial amphitheaters couldn't afford the exotic animals or elaborate sets of the Colosseum, so they improvised. Smaller arenas used local wildlife, boars, wolves, bears. They staged simpler mythological reenactments. They supplemented with more gladiatorial combat. And crucially, they used local condemned prisoners, which in the eastern provinces especially, increasingly meant Christians. The governor of each province had the authority to stage games, and the games served identical purposes everywhere: political legitimacy, public distraction, social bonding. A provincial governor who put on good games earned loyalty. A governor who skimped earned contempt. So the execution as entertainment model scaled. It didn't just happen in Rome, it happened everywhere Rome was, which, by the 2nd century, was most of the known world. The amphitheater at El Gem in modern Tunisia could seat 35,000. The one at Nîmes in France still stands almost completely intact, and it held 24,000. Ephesus in modern Turkey had an arena carved into a hillside that could hold 25,000. Each one of these venues hosted executions of Christians and other condemned people as regular programming. And each one had its own local economy of suppliers, craftsmen, vendors, and entertainers orbiting the central fact of public death. This is what empire looks like when it perfects its entertainment. Not one arena, a network. Not one spectacle, a content distribution system spanning 3 continents, running simultaneously, year after year, for generations. Act 7. The audience. The hardest part to understand. Everything I've described so far is awful. But there's one element that's worse than all of it, and it's the element we most want to avoid. The audience. 50,000 people in the Colosseum. Families, children, grandmothers, the butcher from the Subura, the lawyer from the Esquiline, the freedwoman who runs a laundry. Normal people, not psychopaths, not soldiers brutalized by war. Bakers, teachers, merchants, mothers who kiss their children goodnight and then walk to the arena at dawn to secure a good seat for the day's killing. How? This is the question that should haunt us. Not, how could the emperors do this? Emperors are aberrations. The question is, how could everyone else enjoy it? And the answer is uncomfortably simple. They were trained. Not in a classroom, not by propaganda exactly, by repetition. The game started when you were a child. Your parents took you. The first time was probably overwhelming, loud, confusing, the smell of blood. But you noticed that no one around you was upset. Your father was cheering. Your mother was eating dates. The people around you were laughing, chatting, placing bets. The social signals told you this was normal. This was fun. This was what Romans do. By the 10th visit, the shock had faded. By the 50th, it was routine. By the 100th, you were a critic. You had opinions about which animal handlers were skilled, which gladiators had good footwork, which executions were cleverly staged, and which were boring. You developed taste, and that taste, that sophisticated, cultivated, educated appreciation for aestheticized killing, is the engine that powered the entire industry. The supply existed because the demand was real. The demand was real because it had been cultivated over generations. Every Roman child who grew up attending the games became an adult who expected them, needed them, and judged their quality with expert precision. The Christians? To the average audience member, they weren't people in the way that mattered. They were a category. Condemned criminals, enemies of the state, atheists who refused to honor the gods. They had removed themselves from the social contract, and once you're outside the contract, you're not a person anymore. You're material. And the Romans? The ones in the stands? They were us. Different clothes, different gods, same neurology, same capacity for normalization, same ability to watch suffering and call it a Tuesday. That's the real horror of this story. Not that Rome built an entertainment industry on human death, but that the audience, every single one of them, was an ordinary person who had simply been taught, one game at a time, one death at a time, that this was civilization. The last recorded gladiatorial games took place around 404 AD, when a monk named Telemachus reportedly jumped into the arena to stop a fight and was stoned to death by the furious crowd. The Emperor Honorius, moved by the monk's sacrifice, or perhaps just reading the political winds of an increasingly Christian empire, officially banned the games. But the amphitheaters didn't disappear. They were repurposed. Some became fortresses, some became churches, some became quarries, their stones pulled out and built into cathedrals. The Colosseum itself was eventually consecrated as a sacred site, a memorial to the Christian martyrs who died on its sand. The hunters of yesterday became the saints of tomorrow. And the entertainment industry? It didn't die. It evolved. The amphitheaters became theaters. The spectacles became plays. The appetite, that deep Roman human appetite for watching extraordinary things happen to other people, found new forms, new technologies, new content. But if you listen carefully, in every stadium roar, in every viral video of someone else's pain, in every algorithm that learns what you can't look away from, you can still hear the crowd. Thanks for watching Dust and Dynasty. If this video made you think, subscribe and leave a comment below. We'll see you in the next one.